On this episode of RevHangout, Ben and I talk about the 12-hour race at Sebring and the wild race that we got at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's do it! Hello everybody, and welcome back to RevHangout. I'm your host, Nathan Nephew, and alongside me across the airwaves is my good friend and co-host, Ben Bagley. How's it going, Ben?
Well, I was going to mow the lawn today, but it's raining here in the desert, so it could be going better.
I see. Well, it was a beautiful day out here in the valley, so looks like we swapped sides a little bit there. Alright, so we've got some stuff to catch up on from last week, so I guess we'll just dive right in. The Sebring 24-hour happened last week. There are several classes that raced, including the DPI class, which is what replaced LMP1. Then there is LMP2, LMP3, GTD Pro, and GTD, which is Grand Touring Daytona. Okay, starting with DPI. Cadillac swept the podium in the DPI class this year. There were many on-track incidents during the race, as there tend to be at Sebring. It's an extremely bumpy track that can catch even the most experienced drivers off guard. We saw the leader of the race spin out several times throughout the day, which made for some entertaining action. Things really heated up when the sun went down. Drivers began to misjudge overtakes and crash out as a result. Earl Bamber in the O2 car crashed into one of the Ferraris in the GTD class as he was battling Richard Westbrook in the number 5 car. This allowed Westbrook to take the lead of the race with just over an hour of running left to go. Bamber gathered himself and eventually fought back to take the lead of the race and ultimately win. The top 3 teams in the DPI class were, in first place, Earl Bamber, Alex Lynn, and Neil Jani. In second place, Tristan Vautier, Richard Westbrook, and Loic Duval. In third place, Pipo Durrani, Tristan Nunez, and Mike Conway. Moving on to LMP2. The LMP2 class featured a father-son team this year, consisting of 2-time Indy 500 winner Juan Pablo Montoya and his son Sebastian Montoya. This was an exciting pair to watch, as Sebastian was in his IMSA debut and was unproven at this level. He excelled in the car to say the least, gaining time on his opponent's hand over fist. His father, a legend in the motorsports world, got behind the wheel next and unfortunately crashed out on lap 83, damaging the car beyond repair. This accident was not his fault, as another prototype car spun in front of him, forcing him into the car beside him before being sandwiched by the spinning car. None of the drivers involved in the accident were injured, thank goodness. I'm sure we'll see the Montoyas back at another IMSA race very soon, and very much look forward to it. That being said, the number 52 car drove off into the distance and won by a comfortable margin. The top 3 teams in the LMP2 class were, in first place, Ben Keating, Michael Jensen, and Scott Huffaker. In second place, Fritz Van Aert, Gito Vandergaard, and Dylan Murray. In third place, Dwight Merriman, Kyle Tilley, and Ryan Diel. Moving on to LMP3. The LMP3 class was more of a test of who could reach the end of the race rather than who got there first. Drivers in this class struggled throughout the day and many had a short day. To sum it all up, the third place team, car number 38, finished 8 laps behind the leaders and was still on the podium. The top 3 teams in the LMP3 class were Joao Barbosa, Malte Jacobsen, Lance Wilsey in first place. In second place, Ari Ballo, Garrett Grist, Dakota Dickerson. In third place, Daniel Goldberg, Rasmus Lind, and Cameron Shields. Moving on to the GTD Pro class. This class was very competitive early on in the day, with all of the drivers fighting for the top position. This class stayed way closer than all the others throughout the race, with most of the cars finishing within 1 lap of the leader. In the end, the Corvette raced the Lamborghini to the checkered flag and won. The top 3 teams in the GTD Pro class were, in first place, Antonio Garcia, Jordan Taylor, and Nick Katzberg. In second place, Marco Mappelli, Andrea Caldarelli, and Mirko Bortolotti. In third place, Cooper McNeil, Jules Ganoun, and Mauro Engel. And let's finally move on to the GTD class. This class rounded things off with some good racing all around. The Ferraris stood out as some of the fastest cars in class and took the first and third spots on the podium. The top 3 teams in the GTD class were, in first place, Roberto Lacorte, Giorgio Cernaggiotto, Antonio Fuoco. In second place, Mike Skeen, Stephen McAleer, Daniel Hunkadea. Oh my gosh, these names. Hunkadea. And in third place, Simon Mann, Luis Perez Campunk, and Tony Valander. Okay, that was a mouthful.
You truly have a gift for pronunciation of names. I wouldn't have made it half that far.
It's tough with the all Italian teams.
It really is, yeah. Those Ferrari factory teams really kind of mess you up sometimes.
Yeah, but okay, so it was a really pretty hectic race. There were crashes pretty much constantly.
It was terrifying.
Yeah, especially at night. There were some pretty crazy incidents at night, and there were a couple of cars that stalled out and then just sat on the racing line.
Oh yeah, that was even during the daytime there was a worrying trend of, I think it was a lot of the LMP3 cars, a lot of the rookies just not really knowing how to save themselves out of a corner, out of a spin, or whatever happened to them. They'd just stop, either right in the middle of the pit lane or right in the middle of a blind corner or coming off of a blind corner. And it was just, I mean, it's impressive on all the cars behind them for not hitting them, but goodness gracious.
Yeah, no, it's common courtesy and practice, and just for safety in all motorsports. When you crash your car, you're supposed to stop moving as quickly as you can, and most of the time you do that just by planting your foot into the brake. But a lot of these cars, especially with the younger drivers, when they spun out, were just rolling across the track after they spun. And even the commentators noticed and spoke up and said, like, this is not what they need to be doing, and they really need to learn that when you crash, even if you're on the track, you just have to stop moving, because if you move, it just makes it harder for everybody else to avoid you.
Yeah, there were some pretty entertaining recoveries there. A little bit of a donut. These cars, they just crash into the dirt, flip a quick UE, and head right back out on the track.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love endurance racing for that reason, that just because you crash out, as long as you're not beyond repair, you're not completely out of the race.
Yeah.
A lot of cars, especially in 24-hour races, will completely break down, and then they'll get towed back to the pits, and then they'll get fixed, and then they go back out.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, watching the amount of damage these cars took and kept going. I mean, even like the DPI cars go clear off the track into the grass, wipe through a couple of signposts, and then just run right back onto the track, call it good. I saw one guy who came into the pits without a brake rotor. He'd melted it off. That was pretty impressive, but he was able to get it back to the pits at that point.
Yeah, I don't know how you managed to brake even remotely under control with 3 brakes.
Yeah.
Because evidently his brakes were overheating, so I'd imagine the other 3 were overheating as well, and one of them was completely burned out.
Yeah, it's just impressive. And that kind of transfers over to how close the drivers are willing to get to other drivers. And sometimes it results in, bumps and crashes and tip-offs and all that sort of nasty stuff. But sometimes you get really, really just gutsy overtakes, too.
Yeah. People from across classes were really sending it into some of the turns. Like I said, the leader of the race in the DPI class at one point crashed into one of the back marker Ferraris, just sideswiped and going into a turn because he had the guy in second place right on his tail. Then he ended up spinning out, and I think he only lost somewhere between 6 and 10 seconds, and then managed to make that back up and pass for the lead, and won by what looked like a pretty comfortable margin.
Yeah, it was impressive. It was almost like watching a video game at some points, Gran Turismo or Forza, where you're on your Xbox or PlayStation, you're just weaving through traffic, you just bump the AI cars off the road, you pit maneuver others, you sideswipe some, and you just absolutely grind your way to the top.
Yeah, there was a lot of sideswiping. You see, I found it kind of funny. The higher class cars would literally just, it seemed sometimes, just use the lower class cars as brakes.
Yep.
They would just sideswipe them and run them completely off the road.
Oh yeah, there are some pit
So,
maneuvers that the California Highway Patrol will be proud of in this race.
oh, indeed, very much so. But yep, there were a lot of drive-through penalties, which is pretty much the standard penalty if you cause someone to crash in endurance racing. So lots of those being handed out. That basically means you just have to drive through the pit lane without stopping for a pit stop. So it's just a big waste of time because you have to slow down a lot and everybody can just keep going at full speed. So that's the significance of that. There were quite a few, especially in the upper classes. Quite a few penalties given out over the 12 hours.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay, so that's all we had from the last week other than the F1 race. So let's just jump right into everybody's favorite series. The second installment of the 2022 Formula One World Championship took place in Saudi Arabia at the Corniche Circuit in the capital city of Jeddah. This track's second year on the calendar, and so far it's brought us two very good races. Both of them have been riddled with controversy. This year the race was very nearly cancelled as there was a drone strike mere miles from the track on Friday. The event organizers met with the teams and drivers several times over the next few hours and ultimately decided that the race would go ahead. So this was kind of the big story this weekend, other than the crazy race that we got.
Yeah, and I think it kind of led into a lot of drivers' concerns about just having the race in Saudi Arabia overall. Obviously, we don't really want to get into all the politics surrounding that on this particular show, but there are loads of places where you can read about that. But it was kind of an opportunity for drivers to kind of get their foot in the door about how they really feel about the race. And in the end, it ended up still going on. But it's very exciting, having a missile strike and getting to watch the flames from the track.
Yeah, I can imagine why some people would be a little concerned, to say the least. I think this will get some conversations going about what's going to happen in the future in terms of this event. I really like the track. I think it's really cool. It's very dangerous, so it does need to be changed a little bit. But overall, I really like the layout. I like the high speed. I like the DRS games, which we'll talk about later. So I would be kind of sad to see this track go, but at the same time, I would understand if a decision was made either way.
I think they could make it up to me if they replaced it with Spa.
Yes. Spa. Yeah, because it sounds like Spa might be leaving the calendar in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Which would be a real tragedy, because that is my favorite track.
It's a lot of people's favorite track.
To drive. Yeah, it's a great track. So to see Spa replace that would be okay with me. But let's move into qualifying. The craziness of the race all started here. The track has 3 very long straights and several low-speed corners, so engine power is really important at this track. With that being said, the Mercedes-powered cars struggled to put good lap times on the board due to their lack of engine power. This was highlighted when Lewis Hamilton was knocked out in Q1 to qualify 16th for the race. Q2 saw a very scary accident involving Haas driver Mick Schumacher. He came around turn 10 and hit the inside curb at a weird angle, which sent his car into a spin and into the wall at over 170 miles an hour. The session was red flagged for almost an hour as they tended to Schumacher and cleaned up the gigantic mess that the incident created. Schumacher was taken to the medical center for routine checks and thankfully had no major injuries. The car, however, was beyond repair for the race the next day. Schumacher should be back in the car for the Australian GP in 2 weeks' time, so I'm looking forward to seeing him hopefully get a chance to fight for some spots again. In Q3, we saw a wild battle for pole. Sainz put up a very impressive 128.402, which was provisional pole for all of about 5 seconds. Leclerc then crossed the line with a 128.225, which was about a full second faster than the commentators predicted the pole-winning time would be. Sergio Perez had a rather quiet qualifying until this last session, where he managed to decrease his best time by over half a second. Perez crossed the line with a time of 128.2 flat, beating Leclerc's time by less than 0.03 of a second. Verstappen crossed the line with a 128.461, qualifying P4 and finishing the second row with Sainz. Perez took his first pole position and became the first Mexican driver to ever do so. This was poised to be a crazy race, and a crazy race it was.
Yeah, so backing up to the Schumacher crash, how do you think this is going to affect Haas in the future in terms of budget? Because, I mean, I was watching them recover that car. It fell in half when they picked it up.
Well, they're designed to do that now. The safety designs have changed since last year, and the back half of the car basically is designed to break away in a crash like that, to absorb some of the energy so the driver doesn't have to absorb it all. So that obviously leads to, and I mean, the whole car just falls apart when it crashes now. This was the first big crash that we've seen this season, and it was, I think, jarring for a lot of people to see just how much the car literally just unravels. Because he hit the wall, and in previous years, I mean, it would have done a lot of damage, but he probably would have just taken his back tire off and then spun out and hit the other wall. Whereas in this crash, his car literally disintegrated.
Yeah, but it stopped him dead. Well,
it did.
Dead, but that's what you want the car to do, is to cease motion, and absorb all the impact before it gets to the driver.
Exactly.
But it's going to be an expensive receipt for Haas, especially as one of the smaller teams who didn't really get any money from Constructors' Championship last year.
Yeah, it will be a big expense for sure. I was reading about that earlier, that Haas having to rebuild a car completely this early in the season could be a major setback for them, but we'll have to see. It seems like Haas has the budget for it. I would imagine they probably budgeted for car rebuilds, and they say they don't need outside sponsorship this year. So we'll see how true that really rings. But yeah, it's going to be a massive repair job for Haas, and I'd imagine they probably need a new engine, and that's going to come with consequences later on in the season.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to the race. I'll go through the finishing order first, and then we'll talk about some of the talking points. So, starting in first place, winning the race, we had Max Verstappen, followed by Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Russell, Ocon, Norris, Gasly, Magnussen, Hamilton, Zhou, Hülkenberg, Stroll, Albon, Bottas, Alonso, Ricciardo, Latifi, Tsunoda, and then Schumacher. So we only had 13 finishers. It was kind of a race of attrition. There were 7 people that didn't finish the race. 2 of them didn't even start the race. So there was a lot going on. There were 5
DNFs. Really was.
5 DNFs over the course of the race, and some of them were pretty big.
Yeah, some of them, you might even say, affected the course of the race for a lot of other drivers too.
Indeed. So Perez started on pole. He got a great start and was pulling away from the Ferraris, and so he was basically positioned in a place to win the race. And then there were some radio shenanigans, and it seemed like Ferrari kind of faked out Red Bull. They said that they were going to have Leclerc box and put on fresh tires so that hopefully they could overtake Red Bull in the pits. This caused Red Bull to react and bring Perez in before Leclerc to try and cover off the undercut. So Leclerc went on, Perez boxed, and the next lap, or it might have even been that lap, Latifi...
Right around there.
Yeah. Nicholas Latifi hit the wall and his car was destroyed right on the racing line. So that caused a virtual safety car, which eventually turned into a full safety car. And at that point, Perez was the only person who had pitted. So
Oh, I
he
thought the Latifi crash happened a lot later in the race between Verstappen and Leclerc.
the Latifi crash? No,
Yeah.
no, there was the Latifi crash was earlier. Um, that's what lost Perez that position. I think
Oh, okay.
the one later on between Verstappen and Leclerc was Albon, because he had a tussle with, I forget who it was. It might have been Stroll. It was Lance Stroll, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
That's
so
what I
that
get for
caused.
watching the race in two parts.
Yeah, so he got his wheel unraveled basically, and he had to stop on the track, which caused a yellow lap at the end of the race, which we'll get to a little bit later on. So back to Perez, he was the only one that boxed at that point, and so everybody else got to pit and put on fresh tires under safety car conditions, which means Perez was outside driving slowly, whereas when he pitted, everybody was out on the track driving quickly under green flag conditions. So he lost about 10 seconds overall in the race, as pretty much everybody got a free pit stop. So he moved
except
into...
for Magnussen and Hamilton, especially.
Yes. So he moved into fourth place after that. Well, third initially, before the restart. He passed Sainz as Sainz was coming out of the pits. When you come out of the pits and it's under safety car, it's really complicated. But there's a line on the ground at the exit of the pit lane called the safety car line, and if you cross that line before someone else, after you pit, then you will be in front of them. So Perez and Sainz crossed the line at almost exactly the same time, but Sainz was just barely ahead at the line. Perez was on the inside of the turn, crossed the line second, and then cut through in front of Sainz to go into third place. So there was a lot of talk during the safety car about where Perez should be, and eventually after the restart, after they were racing, Red Bull instructed Perez to give the position back to Sainz, which, I get it. It was kind of I kind of wanted to see him fight it out, but
Yeah,
fair's
interesting takeaway for that, or for me from that, was the more hands-off approach that we got from race control, where the drivers have an opportunity to give the place back themselves before any action's taken. But if they don't and action ends up being taken, then they get the penalty. So I thought that was kind of an interesting reaction to some of the shenanigans from last season that this is an attempt to rectify. I was wondering what you thought about that.
I think it's good. I think it's good that they leave it to the teams and the drivers to sort out what they want to do. And if they come to agreement, then great. And if not, then the FIA can step in and take charge. I think that just makes things a lot better. People would be less upset if the teams can come to an agreement, because then everybody's happy. But if the FIA has to step in, then they obviously are not going to let an obvious penalty, go unpunished. But yeah, I think it's good for the sport. And I also really liked I've liked in both races so far how the FIA has handled incidents. They note incidents, but they take care of them so quickly compared to last year. Like within half a lap, what the punishment or what actually happened and what they're going to do about it. Whereas in previous years, if a penalty happened on track, you would wait maybe half the race, maybe 2 hours after the race before you actually knew what happened and what they decided to do. And so famously in Brazil, I believe in it's either 18 or 19, Lewis Hamilton scored a podium but crashed Alex Albon out on one of the last laps and was given a penalty long after the race had ended, and that bumped Carlos Sainz up into third place, giving Sainz his first podium, which he celebrated alone with his team. Well, he was alone on the podium,
well.
and then, yeah. So he got to celebrate that with McLaren all by himself. So he didn't really get his first podium celebration, but it still counts. But that's not what we want to see in the sport. We want to see the results be the results rather than waiting to see what happens. Exactly. So I'm really glad that the race control is more prompt about their decisions.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so let's talk about the two people that did not start the race. We already talked about Schumacher, so let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda. He had engine problems all week. In qualifying, he had some sort of failure and basically wasn't able to set a time, which pushed him to the back at the start of the race. And then he had an engine failure while he was driving out to line up on the grid. So poor guy. He got the short end of the stick on the Red Bull engine when the other three did last week.
Yeah, they must have only had 3 spare vacuum pumps, and well, somebody had to get an old one.
Exactly. So unfortunately, Tsunoda was not able to start, but he should be back next week. All right. Let's talk about we had a few really, really scrappy battles this week, and one of them was Ocon and Alonso, the two Alpine teammates.
Yeah, that was probably the battle from this race that most people are going to remember.
That was crazy. They were fighting each other so hard. I was ready for one of them to go into the wall.
Yeah, there was some really, really close turns taken. I thought one of them was going to lose a spoiler multiple times going through some of those corners. I thought Ocon was maybe being a little aggressive in some of the points. I think maybe he took some risks that, if they made me uncomfortable, I can't imagine how the mechanics and the pit wall felt on Alpine's side.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was heart attack after heart attack on the Alpine pit wall. But they kept it pretty clean overall. There was no real contact. There might have been a brush or two, but they kept it clean. They kept it fair. They both raced very hard. Ocon has been known to race his teammates very hard. It's something about him in pink cars. Really likes to pressure his teammate. So we didn't really see that much last year, but this year it looks like it's back on. They're in a competitive car, so maybe they're both fighting for the points a little more.
Yeah, because I know Alonso didn't finish, but if he had a chance to not finish the race, do you think he would have been able to stay ahead of Ocon? Or do you think that Ocon would have eventually been allowed to battle him a bit more? Because I know the team kind of told him to back off towards the end.
Yeah, I think they would have. I think Alonso would have ended up in front if he didn't DNF. But it's hard to say, obviously. Yep. But I mean, yeah, Alpine eventually probably would have told them to stop fighting because it was really honestly tanking both of their races because they brought Bottas and Magnussen into the fight when they really didn't need to.
Yeah,
they were fighting each other so hard. They lost so much time, like 10 plus seconds to the cars behind, and they ended up fighting a 4-way battle rather than just with each other.
Yeah, maybe used some of that aggression on defending from Magnussen and Bottas.
Yeah. I'm sure Alpine would have put a stop to that fight eventually, but it all turned out okay. Well, sort of.
For one of the drivers.
Yeah. For one of the drivers. Speaking of things that turned out okay, let's talk about Hamilton's recovery because he drove really well. He was my pick for driver of the day, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't win it, but he started 16th and made his way all the way up to 6th, I think, and then I don't remember if he had a problem or if he was just trying some alternate strategy, but he had to pit again towards the end of the race and ended up finishing 10th. So he still got a point, but he did recover from 16th to 6th about 2/3 of the way through the race. So really good drive from him to
He
get
probably
all the
could
way
have
back.
come out ahead of Magnussen, except for the red or yellow flag that kept the pit lane entry closed due
Hmm.
to, I don't remember who it was who was stopped in the pit lane. It might have been Alonso, actually.
I believe it was. Yeah, I think it was Alonso.
Yeah, because if the pit lane hadn't been closed, I mean, he could have gotten away with a really good pit stop under that yellow and gotten away in front of Magnussen, but he had to
Yeah.
go around another lap and
Yeah, that kind of
just got
caused
the
him some
short end of the
problems.
stick on that one.
Yeah. So speaking of Alonso stopped in the pit entry, the reliability of all of the engines is now kind of in question because
Yes.
every single engine this week had a failure. Everywhere, like, so the Honda Tsunoda's engine failed at the beginning of the race. That was the only problem that Red Bull had.
Yep.
And then let's see, we had Daniel Ricciardo, I think, was next, or Alonso, one of the two. And
Those are
so,
pretty much at the same time,
yeah, it was almost at the exact same time. It
right
was
around
kind of
lap
weird.
37.
We had like three engine failures because Bottas also had an engine failure or something.
Right.
So that's the Renault engine and the Mercedes engine and the Ferrari engine.
That's the hat trick right there.
Right, plus the Red Bull engine from the beginning. So all four engines had a failure this week. So it'll be interesting to see who can make the most reliable engine, because at the moment it doesn't look like any of them are perfect. But none of them are ever perfect. I mean, there's always stuff like this at the beginning of a season.
No, you're right. But right now, I'd say my money is still on Ferrari for having probably the best combination of blistering performance and not knocking their drivers out of contention
I would say
uh,
so.
every race.
I would agree with
Because
that.
Tsunoda was the only Red Bull powered driver who was able to finish the first Grand Prix. And it looks like the bad luck came back around to bite him on this one and finished him off in the second race.
Yeah. So with the reliability problems came some opportunities for some lower teams, slower teams, I should say, to get some points. With 7 DNFs, there were only 3 non-points finishers, which were Zhou, Hulkenberg, and Stroll. So looks like Aston Martin still out of the points, and Williams had a double DNF. So neither of them have points still. But we did see some people jump up. McLaren seemed to have rebounded a little bit. Norris got 7th place, and
Yeah,
I believe Ricardo was kind of in that top 10 area for a while before he had his engine failure.
yeah. I mean, McLaren's still really not the team we were expecting this season, but it was good to see Norris claw his way up a little bit to get some points finally for the team. Although Ocon ahead of him was pretty impressive.
Yes, I think Alpine is going to win the best of the rest this year. At least, well, I can't say that. It's way too early. But Alpine, at the moment, I think is the 4th best car.
I think so too.
So, well, I guess that depends on how you define best of the rest. But I would say it's pretty clearly Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, and then Alpine.
Yeah, which is an interesting shakeup that I don't think many people saw coming.
Yeah, and speaking of Mercedes, Russell had a really good race.
Yeah,
And
he's been pretty consistent over these past 2 races. I don't know if you can call it consistency, but
he did outqualify Lewis Hamilton this time by
yep.
quite a margin. um,
Yeah,
and then he did finish 5th, which I think I had him finishing 4th, so I was kind of close there.
yeah, that's no small feat. If you'd watched the race, that's pretty impressive out of Russell.
Yeah, and he was really fighting with some people. He had some really cool, really awesome overtakes. Down into turn 1, really dive bombing some people. So it's good to see that he's already comfortable enough in that car to really go for it.
Yeah, which is exactly what the team needs in an
Oh
era
yeah,
where it seems that they're not going to be just as brutally strong as previous years, and they just need both drivers to be at the top of their game scoring points, which they did this race
yes they
in
did.
order to make it as close to the top as possible.
Yeah. They really need both of them to be on form. So speaking of some good points, Kevin Magnussen finished in P9, getting 2 points for Haas. So
Yep.
a 2-point finishes in a row for Haas after last year. It's really,
Yeah.
really awesome. I love that they're back scoring points again and competitive.
Yeah, it's really good to see. And it makes me hopeful that when Schumacher's back in racing shape, maybe we see him start to work his way closer to actually getting some points for the first time in his
Yeah,
career.
that would be really cool to see. I'm sure he will score points this season. I would be very surprised if he didn't. Okay, let's move on to the let's talk about where we sit in the Constructors' Championship after this race. Ferrari is on top with 78 points. Mercedes in second with 38 points. Red Bull in third with 37. Then Alpine with 16. Haas with 12. Alfa Romeo with 9. AlphaTauri with 8. McLaren with 6. Aston Martin with 0. And Williams with 0. So Ferrari is out to quite a big lead early on. Looks like they're 41 points ahead of Red Bull, who I would consider their primary competitor. So that's a good amount of points.
Yeah, I hate to use the word commanding so early in the season, but it's hard to imagine after seeing these first two races and the cars that Ferrari's put out and the drivers performing at just really high levels. It's hard to see them performing any worse than they have these past two races.
Yeah, starting the season off with a 1-2 and then the second race getting a 1-3 is almost ideal in the literal sense of the word.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 2-3, right?
Oh, 2-3, my bad, sorry. Yes. But when Red Bull got a double DNF in the first race, that really helped them out a lot.
Yeah, that really pushed them ahead. It even pushed Mercedes ahead by 1 point on Red Bull, although it seems that Red Bull's going to be able to make up that gap quite quickly.
Oh, yes, I would be surprised if Red Bull was not in second place after the next race. But we will see in time. So let's move on to the Drivers' Championship, where Leclerc is leading with 45 points, followed by Sainz with 33, Verstappen with 25, Russell with 22, Hamilton with 16, Ocon with 14, Perez with 12, and Magnussen with 12, Bottas with 8, Norris with 6, Tsunoda with 4, Gasly with 4, Alonso with 2, Zhou with 1, and then Schumacher, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Albon, Ricciardo, and Latifi are yet to score points this season. So Leclerc is out in front, and Sainz in second. So I think those two are still going to be up there fighting. I think they're going to fight for the entire season.
Yeah.
I think Sainz is really looking good, and I think he's gonna win some races. It seems like he just needs this track.
Yeah, it'll be great for him to be able to push Leclerc too.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is Sainz really pushes Leclerc, and now Verstappen is going to be pushing Leclerc. So I think Leclerc is going to pull out some really, really good performances this year, and then Sainz will as well. I think Sainz is just as good as Leclerc. I think he just needs the right track, and
Yep.
He might need to get used to these cars a little bit more, but I think that the talent at the top of the field, and then in the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship between Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Russell, and Hamilton, I think those are the best 5 drivers on the grid.
Yeah, which is even more impressive when you see Ocon right behind them.
Yeah. Ocon, and then, well, I think another one is Gasly. I think Gasly's one of the best drivers on the grid, and Norris, but they're not in cars that are super competitive this year, unfortunately.
No, the Red Bull drivers definitely got the short end of the stick on their point scoring, both of them only competing in one race so far this season.
Yeah, not too great. But that will all change as the season goes on. I'm sure things will settle out in the constructors. Red Bull will move up, Mercedes will move down. And then I think Perez will move up. Perez looks really fast this year. I think he's got a really good handle on this car. I mean, he was 2/10 faster than Verstappen in qualifying this time around. So
Yeah.
I would argue that Perez is going to be what Red Bull wanted him to be last season. I think he's got it now. Because he seems way more stable and comfortable in that car.
Yeah, I think he really needed the confidence too, after being with Racing Point. Not as high-performing car, and then going straight to Red Bull. It's a big jump for a guy who had never gotten qualifying P1 or such a good qualifying performance until 11 years into his career.
Right. Yeah, no, getting signed on to a major team after, 10, 11 years, I could imagine how how grueling that 10 years must have been, because he was always kind of just around being in the 5th place car, it seemed.
Yep.
It seemed like Racing Point were always kind of in the same spot. Now that I think about it, I haven't really thought about that before, but Racing Point was always kind of just the middle of the midfield, except for 2020, when they were like the 3rd fastest car.
Yep, and now we have Alpine, which BWT sponsorship, pink car, top of the midfield again.
Yes, maybe BWT is the the reason for that.
That's the special sauce.
Special sauce, yeah. And we will get to see the primary Alpine livery starting next week.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. I like it more than the all pink, I will say.
The pink is unique, but it's cool for 2 races, I've decided.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see their normal car. The livery's grown on me quite a bit. A lot of the liveries have. I didn't like a lot of them at first, but they look a lot better on track. I think a lot of them do.
Having that directional lighting really helps.
Yes, rather than the random render lighting that, makes everything look different.
Yeah, that soft box glow.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of new segments on RevHangout. We'll start with this one, which will be short and sweet every week. This is the overtake of the week. It's not confined to Formula One. It's any motorsport, any overtake. If you send it and it sticks and it's awesome, then you have a shot. But the one that I saw that really was pretty crazy was Fernando Alonso's overtake on Esteban Ocon at turn 1 on lap 7 of the F1 race this week. There was such little space. They were inches from each other, and then Ocon was inches from the wall, and it was, oh man, crazy. That could have ended so poorly, but Alonso made it stick, and Ocon made it really tough for him.
Yep. I mean, any pass that happened during that exchange was bound to be just one of the more exciting parts of the race, and having it cut that close by Ocon and Alonso made it even more exciting.
Yeah, having it be teammates, I think, just adds to the suspense, because the stakes are so high. If someone makes a mistake, it's a double DNF, and that's not good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, congratulations to Alonso for winning our first Overtake of the Week award. And we'll move on to the Pit Stop Championship, which I'm really excited for. So the way we're going to do this is every driver, we will take their fastest pit stop from the race. It doesn't matter how many they have, just the fastest one for each driver. And then we'll rank them. The top 10 in the race get points. It will be the same scoring as regular F1. And then at the end of the season, we will look at all of the different data. We'll look at the individuals and who got the best pit stop, and then we will pool the points and look at the teams and figure out who wins the pit stop championship in terms of consistency and also being quick. So, starting things off, we had the fastest pit stop of this race, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, was Lando Norris, and his total pit stop time from the time he entered to the time he left the pits was 20.383 seconds. Followed by Perez at 20.481. Then Ricardo, I won't read all these out, but Ricardo, Albon, Verstappen, Leclerc, Ocon, Russell, Hulkenberg, and Sainz. And the spread between Norris and Sainz was about 1.2 seconds. So that's quite a big gap between first and 10th, it seems. Because pit stops are usually, well, it seemed this year they're about 3 seconds. They're a little longer.
Yeah, I've been surprised how slow they are this season.
Yeah, I don't know if that's to do with regulations or just the new tires. I think we talked about that a little bit last week. But, yeah, and I also couldn't find the actual in the pit box times, which I was searching for a little while, but I couldn't find anything, so I think we'll just have to roll with this. So I will dole out the points for this week, and then I will go back later and I will add the results from last week, and then keep track of that on a spreadsheet, and we will obviously update you as the season goes on.
Very cool.
All right, so let's talk about our predictions for this race in Saudi Arabia. I almost nailed it. Well, I don't know. I didn't get the winner, but I got the top 5 completely right.
Okay.
So I'll take it.
Yep. Yeah, I just barely squeaked in with Sainz as my dark horse who came in, but I just had the order shuffled around a little bit, and I don't know what Hamilton's doing in there, but that's okay.
Well, I don't think anyone could have quite predicted what happened to Hamilton this week.
No.
So, yeah, I was being optimistic putting Russell instead of Hamilton in the top 5, and I got lucky there. But my top 5 prediction was Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, Perez.
Yep, and then mine was Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, and Russell.
Okay, and then just to remind everybody, the actual top 5 was Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Russell. Okay.
So Nathan was very close. He walks away with this one, but I'll get him next time.
Okay. You want to do like points? You want to do 1 point if you win, and then we'll keep track. Go back at the end of the season, see who's best.
Keep track of how badly I lose? I don't think so.
No? You think you... I don't know. I've gotten lucky the last couple times, but I don't know if that's going to continue. We'll have to see.
Yeah, you're already ahead. I can't afford to keep track of this.
That's fair. That's fair. I can't change the rules after we start. I got you. All right. So maybe next season on that.
Maybe next season. Let me prepare first.
All right. We'll move on to our predictions for the next race. The Australian Grand Prix is set to take place on April 9th. This should be the first race in Australia since March of 2019. It's been 3 years since we raced there, and I'm super excited to see that track again. They've made a bunch of changes since the last time we've seen it, and I think it should make the racing a little bit closer. So let's go over what we think is going to happen. Do you want to do your top 5 first, or do you want me to go first? I don't remember who went first last time. I think I did.
I think you might have gone first, yeah. So, let's see. It's Australia. It's been a while since we've seen an Australian Grand Prix. Therefore, it'll be a relatively fresh track for a lot of people. It doesn't really come into any sort of relevance for what I'm thinking. But I'm going to say it's Verstappen again. And then Leclerc. And then Perez. I think Sainz is going to come after them. And then rounding out 5th place. That's a tough one. I'm going to say Ricardo gets... no, I'm going to have Ricardo as my dark horse. I'm going to put Russell as my 5th. But I want Ricardo as my dark horse because he deserves it. It's been a while since he's had a home race.
He does deserve it. I was really hoping he would be in a good car this year because he wants that podium so bad.
He's been trying so hard to get home for the past 2 years, 3 years?
2 or 3 years almost, yeah. So That poor guy. I hope Ricardo does well. I don't know if I'm gonna predict him up that high though, unfortunately. I think for me, I'm gonna say Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz. I'm gonna go fourth place, Ocon, and then
Interesting.
fifth place. I'm just thinking where I want to put Perez. I'm gonna go sixth place Ocon. I'm gonna go or fifth or fourth place Ocon, and then fifth place Alonso, and then I'll put Perez as my dark horse.
Interesting. Perez is a dark horse. You don't think he's going to break top 5?
I don't know. I'm just trying to throw some interesting stuff out there.
Fair enough.
But I would say, man, Ocon and Alonso look so good though. So yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll put Perez in as my dark horse because he probably will get like fourth or fifth. But okay, so that is those are our predictions for the top 5. Let's go over our fastest lap prediction.
Fastest lap. I think that's going to be Leclerc. I think that's pretty easy.
Okay. Just for the sake of being different, I'll say Sainz.
Okay. And driver of the day, who are you thinking for that?
Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah.
I think he will win that.
Yeah. I mean, how can he not?
Right. He's the only Australian driver on the grid at the moment. And, man, he deserves it.
He really does.
So unless he has an atrocious race, I think he'll probably win driver of the day.
I think even if he has an atrocious race, he'll still be driver of the day. I mean, you saw what everyone was able to do for Raikkonen.
For Kimi. Yeah. Yeah. For people who don't remember or missed it, Kimi Raikkonen won driver of the day in Abu Dhabi at the last race of the season last year. And he DNF'd, so it didn't. Yeah. It wasn't really and it was completely his fault too. So I wouldn't put it past the F1 fans to give Ricciardo the driver of the day, regardless of how he does.
Yep.
But
yeah, so at least we have that we can kind of count on.
Yeah, that'll be something to look forward to, and hopefully we get a good race. I know a lot of people have kind of questioned the Australian track in the past, but it has been changed, and I think the changes look good. It'll hopefully make the racing a little closer. Plus, with these new cars, the racing's so close between everybody. The cars are so much closer together, I feel like, this year. So I've been really enjoying this season so far, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of it.
Yep, me too. Ready to get a refresher on the Australian Grand Prix track after it's been so long I can barely remember it.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think that's all we've got on the docket for today. Do you have any closing thoughts, Ben?
I do not.
Alrighty. Well then, thank you everybody so much for listening. We had a great time talking about some great racing today and look forward to doing it again. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time after the Australian Grand Prix, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed today's episode of RevHangout, leave a like or rating on the platform you listen on. It really helps us out. If you'd like to follow our daily thoughts and comments on the racing world, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RevHang Media. Signing off for now, I have been Nathan.
And I've been Ben. Thanks for coming to hang out with us, guys.
Yeah, have a great week, everybody.